If you grew up in the UK anytime in the last 90 years, the red and white sign of Wilko was a permanent fixture of the high street. It was the shop that sold everything and nothing at the same time. You went in for a bottle of bleach and walked out with a packet of wildflower seeds, a framed picture of a stag, and 3 kilos of pick and mix. It was the ultimate bits and bobs shop, a staple of the British high street that felt like it would be there forever. But in August 2023, 400 shops closed, 12,000 people lost their jobs, and a brand that had survived 2 world wars and multiple recessions collapsed into a pile of debt and recriminations. The collapse of Wilko was a failure of management, a failure of strategy, and a masterclass in how to take a beloved heritage brand and drive it directly into the ground. For decades, Wilko was an incredibly successful family business. Founded in 1930 by James Kempsey Wilkinson, it operated on a simple philosophy: sell decent stuff cheap. They filled the gap left by Woolworths when it collapsed in 2008, becoming the go-to place for homeware, gardening, and health and beauty. However, the rot was already starting to set in. The company was owned by the Wilkinson family, with Lisa Wilkinson, the granddaughter of the founder, taking over as chair in 2014. On the surface, things looked steady, but underneath, the company was drifting. The retail landscape was changing aggressively, and Wilko was standing still. Yet, while the business was starting to struggle with profitability, money was still flowing out to the family and shareholders. Between 2019 and 2023, the Wilkinson family and trusts received millions in dividends. In fact, a total of £77 million was paid out in the decade leading up to the collapse. Lisa Wilkinson defended this, arguing that they had significant reserves at the time and that the payments were standard corporate practice. That might be true, but it paints a picture of a company that didn't realize it was bleeding until it was too late. At the very moment the business needed heavy investment to modernize its supply chain and fix its aging shops, cash was leaving the building. The biggest self-inflicted wound, however, was the botched attempt to modernize their supply chain. Wilko tried to consolidate its logistics, hoping to save money and improve efficiency. Instead, they created a bottleneck. They brought in a new management team to overhaul the system, but the transition was a disaster. Stock wasn't getting to the shops. You'd have a shop in a prime location with empty gaps on the shelves where the best-selling items should be. Customers who came in for cat food found the shelf empty, so they went to Tesco or B&M, and once they broke the habit of going to Wilko, they didn't come back. This supply chain chaos coincided with a massive strategic error. Wilko tried to move away from its budget roots and started introducing slightly more expensive design-led homeware. They wanted to be a mini John Lewis rather than a slightly better Poundland. They lost sight of their core customer, the person looking for a bargain on washing up liquid and school supplies. The financial figures from this period are grim. In 2022, Wilko reported a loss of £36.8 million. By the start of 2023, that hole was getting deeper. The company was running out of cash. Without it, you can't buy stock. And if you can't buy stock, you have nothing to sell. It's a death spiral that's incredibly difficult to pull out of. Lisa Wilkinson and the board later blamed the perfect storm of external factors. They pointed to the fallout from the Liz Truss mini-budget, which sent interest rates soaring and spooked the markets. They pointed to the cost of living crisis, arguing that customers just didn't have money to spend. They blamed the high rents on their high street locations. While those factors were definitely real, they don't explain why Wilko collapsed while its direct competitors thrived. B&M, Home Bargains, and Poundland were operating in the exact same economy, dealing with the same inflation and selling to the same cash-strapped customers. Yet, they were posting profits and opening new shops while Wilko was boarding theirs up. The difference was agility and location. Wilko was tied to the high street, locked into expensive long-term leases in town centers that were seeing footfall drop year after year. Their competitors had focused on retail parks, out-of-town locations with free parking where people could drive up and load their boots with bulk-bought bargains. Wilko was paying premium rents for shrinking crowds, while B&M was paying lower rents for growing ones. By the time 2023 rolled around, Wilko needed a lifeline, a massive injection of cash to restock the shelves and calm the nerves of their suppliers. They turned to Hilco Capital, a firm that specializes in lending to distressed companies. They secured a £40 million facility, but it came with strings attached and high interest. Even that cash injection wasn't enough. The credit insurers, the companies that insure the suppliers against the risk of a retailer going bust, pulled their cover. This is usually the final nail in the coffin for a retailer. When credit insurance is withdrawn, suppliers demand payment upfront. Wilko didn't have the cash to pay upfront, so the suppliers stopped shipping. The shelves got emptier, the revenue dropped further, and the end became inevitable. When the news broke in August 2023 that Wilko had filed a notice of intention to appoint administrators, it triggered a strange mix of shock and resignation. The public was shocked because Wilko was a household name, but anyone paying attention to the business pages or simply walking past their local shop knew this had been coming for a long time. The breakdown of the Wilko estate is a fascinating look at how modern retail cannibalizes its fallen giants. First, there was the brand itself. The Range, a rival retailer owned by billionaire Chris Dawson, stepped in and bought the Wilko brand, the website, and the intellectual property for a reported £5 million. By buying the IP, the Range could sell Wilko-branded products in their own shops and relaunch Wilko.com. Meanwhile, Poundland agreed to take on the leases of 71 shops. B&M bought up a further 51. But crucially, these deals didn't automatically include the staff. They encouraged former Wilko staff to apply for jobs, but there were no guarantees, no transfer of seniority, and no protection of their previous terms and conditions. This left hundreds of other shops with no buyer. These were the bad assets, the shops in dying high streets, the ones with exorbitant rents, the ones that had been dragging Wilko's balance sheet down for years. These shops were simply closed. The handling of the redundancy process drew sharp criticism from the unions. The GMB union accused the company and the administrators of leaving staff in the dark. Workers were finding out about shop closures via social media or leaked news reports before being told officially. The redundancy payments were another kick in the teeth. Because the company was insolvent, it couldn't pay the statutory redundancy packages. The bill fell to the taxpayer via the government's redundancy payments service. Reports later estimated the cost to the taxpayer for these redundancies to be over £40 million. While the family had taken millions in dividends over the previous decade, the public purse was left to cover the cost of the cleanup. This privatized gain and socialized loss is a recurring theme in British retail collapses, and Wilko was a textbook example. The collapse also revealed the extent of Wilko's debt to its suppliers. The administrator's report showed that Wilko owed huge sums to companies like Procter & Gamble and Unilever, as well as hundreds of smaller suppliers who would likely receive pennies on the pound, if anything at all. For a small family-run supplier, a hit like that can be fatal. The ripple effect of Wilko's failure went far beyond its own 400 shops. After the dust settled, a parliamentary committee was called and concluded that while the economic headwinds were strong, they were navigable. Other ships in the same storm didn't sink. Wilko sank because its ship was leaking in water already. The failure to modernize the supply chain, the failure to adapt the shop portfolio, and the failure to retain financial discipline were the holes that let the water in. Wilko's story is a cautionary tale about family ownership. There's a romantic idea that family-run businesses are better, more caring, and more long-term in their thinking. And often, that's true. But Wilko showed the downsides. A reluctance to bring in external expertise, a board structure that lacked challenge, and a confusion between the needs of the family and the needs of the business. Today, the spirit of Wilko, that desire for value, for a bargain, for a shop that feels like a community hub, has migrated. It's in the aisles of Home Bargains and the queues at B&M. The market has moved on. The red and white sign has been taken down, the pick and mix stands have been scrapped, and Wilko has joined Woolworths in the great retail graveyard in the sky. It's a sad end to a British institution, but business is Darwinian. It doesn't care about your history or your fond memories, it only cares about today. And today, Wilko is gone. The question is, who's next? Because if a giant like Wilko can fall this hard and this fast, nobody is safe. But what do you think? Was Wilko's collapse avoidable? Had the management team redirected funds to internal improvements rather than their own pockets, would the company still be around today? Let us know all that and more in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, give us a like, hit subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. Cheers for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.